I'd say that SCHD is still one of the best dividend ETFs for investors who want that attractive dividend yield, plus a lot of exposure to long-term capital gains as well. But the past few months have been pretty rough for value stocks and ETFs like SCHD, and it's come with massive underperformance compared to the S&P 500. But with that being said, this might be the most perfect time to start buying shares of SCHD and adding more of it to your portfolio. So owning SCHD is basically the best way to have the perfect blend between a decent dividend yield and dividend growth. And as we know, buying ETFs is a lot easier and simpler than doing extensive research on individual stocks and having to decide on which stocks to buy. And SCHD isn't a very new ETF, but it's not that old either. Its inception was back in 2011, and since then it's grown to about 47 billion in net assets, or assets under management. But only since about 2020 is when this ETF started to gain more in popularity, and the net assets just started to explode from there. I'd say one of the most attractive things about this ETF is its extremely low expense ratio at 0.06%, and that's kind of what Schwab and Vanguard ETFs are known for, is the fact that they're very low cost. And the dividend yield for SCHD is currently at about 3.63%, and depending on what you're comparing that to, it could be fairly high or fairly low. But regardless of how you look at it, the dividend itself has been increasing every single year since its inception 10 years ago, and it's actually doubled since 2018. And this dividend growth stems from those really solid dividend-paying stocks in its portfolio. Taking a look at its sector exposure, we can see that there's a nice blend between industrials, healthcare, financials, and tech, and the top 10 holdings are pretty equally weighted across the board, all of them being about 4% of the portfolio, and it consists of some of the best dividend-paying stocks in the United States, such as Broadcom, PepsiCo, and AbbVie. And I mentioned Broadcom and PepsiCo because those are two of my favorite dividend-paying stocks that I own in my portfolio. So now that we have an idea of what's inside SCHD, let's talk a little bit about why it's been underperforming for the past few months. Year to date, the S&P 500 is up about 17.3%, and the NASDAQ is up about 40%, but like we talked about earlier, value stocks have been trailing behind significantly, leaving SCHD with a pretty disappointing negative 2% year-to-date return, and that's even including dividends. So why has SCHD been performing so poorly? Well, something we have to remember is that the S&P 500's top holdings consist of mostly tech stocks that are all up over 40% year to date. And the top 7 companies in the index are just driving their returns extremely high this year. So companies like Apple and Microsoft that are both up over 40% this year, even though they both pay a dividend, they're not included in SCHD's portfolio, which explains why the growth this year for SCHD has been relatively slow or non-existent. As you can see, over the 1-year period, SCHD is only up about 5%, trailing behind the S&P 500 1-year return of 19.4%. But like I said earlier, with the exception of the top 7 tech stocks in the S&P 500 that are just driving it significantly high, the general market is only up about 10% this year. If we compare similar ETFs that consist of value stocks and dividend stocks, we can see that SCHD isn't too far behind. DGRO, or DGRO, is a very similar ETF and comparable to SCHD. It pays about a 2.5% dividend with exposure to capital growth as well, and it's up about 11% over the 1-year period. And then we have VTV, which is the Vanguard Value ETF, and it holds a lot of the same type of companies that are in SCHD. There's about a 20% overlap between the two funds, and it's also up about 10.7% over the 1-year time frame. So SCHD is trailing behind by a few percentage points, but has started to gain some momentum back. But something to keep in mind too is that if we zoom out and look at the 3-year return for each of these ETFs, SCHD has both of them beat by a few percentage points. And then if we look at the 5-year return, SCHD still comes out on top, beating them by at least 5%. So really up to you to decide whether or not you think SCHD is on the path to recovery, and if right now is one of the best times to be buying more shares, because from here it might start climbing again. But let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on SCHD, if you're buying more right now or if you're holding off for now. And as always guys, feel free to leave a like on this video if you enjoy content like this, and I'll catch you next time. See ya!